welcome to another edition of Reptile Fight Club. He is always Chuck Boland, the man, the myth, the legend.
Hidely ho there, reptile friends.
Got a lot of little Ned Flanders there.
I diddly doed it.
Well, Owen will be delighted. I don't know if he listens to us, but we'll find out if he listens to us. Yeah. Well, you're fine and dandy like sour candy, I assume.
Ooh,
another
I like that. Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm Oakley Dokley.
Anything new and exciting going on?
No, not really.
Yeah.
No, just same old.
Yeah. Maybe I'll hit a few of the highlights of the herp trip.
Tell me. Yes, I know. I don't want to spoil the whole recap. But
well, it'll probably be released before this anyway. So yeah, where we'll pretend like it's this is after the recap. So I'm sure you heard all the wonderful things about the trip if you're a Patreon on Morelia Pythons Radio. If not, go sign up as a Patreon and you can hear all the juicy details of the show or the trip. But basically, it was Rob Stone. It was, he planned the trip and planned all the places, set up all the arrangements, and we stayed in some really cool places. So the first half of the week we
all
were
camping or
no, he does Airbnb.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
I'm more of a camper guy, so I got there a day early.
I knew that's why I asked.
I got there a day early, and I was planning to sleep in a tent the first night, and I went to get ready for bed, and I'd herped all night and hadn't found much of anything aside from a red spotted toad. It was a cool looking toad, but and then I go to get ready for bed, get set up, the camp set up or whatever, and I couldn't find my sleeping bag, and I'm like, did I leave it at home? And no. I just put I had my sleeping pad, I had the tent, I had like a cot, everything I needed except my sleeping bag. I even brought my pillow, and usually I forget my pillow. So I was like, gosh, dang it. So I just slept in the back of my truck on top of my sleeping pad in the back seat, and it was okay. Like I got a reasonable amount of sleep, maybe 4 or 5 hours. And then, later in the trip, like Keith wanted to get one of my knobtail books. Keith McPeak was on the trip, and I'm like, I forgot I think I left my books in one of the rental places, and I'm like, crap, I don't have the books either. Where did they go? And I'm looking all over for them. I thought I had them with me. I thought I'd brought them into the first place, and I couldn't find them. So finally, I'm like, gosh, dang it, I guess I lost them somewhere. I'm gonna have to call up the Airbnbs and figure out where they went.
Yeah, some rando Airbnb person just came up on some gecko books, huh?
Right.
Oh,
and I get home and I'm cleaning out the car and I lift up the seats and there's my sleeping bag and there's the gecko books. I'd put the seat down on top of them. So I had an uncomfortable night with it. It was a little cold too. It got, down in the 40s that first night. So I was sleeping in my car in the 40s and no real blanket or anything. I just had like my cot, the cot without all the bars and stuff in it. That was my blanket. So it was not the best night's sleep I've ever gotten, but it wasn't too terrible. But anyway, I survived.
Tough man status.
Yeah.
Good job.
So that was, I drove down. I was basically the vehicle for the trip. And so I picked up the guys at the airport the next day, picked up Keith first, and we recorded a nice little Reptile Fight Club. And
I heard that.
Had a fun, chat with him, and Keith's just an awesome guy, really a really cool guy. It was a pleasure to herp with him and get to know him a little better, and it was a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed our conversations and stuff. So definitely hope to herp with him again soon. Also Owen, the famous Owen McIntyre of Morelia Pythons radio fame was there, and he was actually the last one to arrive. So I picked up Keith, and then we recorded a podcast, and we were sitting in this park and all these cool birds flying around. So that was kind of neat.
I know, dude. I was like, geez, this is a reptile. This is a reptile podcast, people. Let's
I will
go.
remind you, birds are reptiles technically. So
I understand that
anyway,
they're flying reptiles, though.
yeah, that's right. And so, you share the sentiments of Rob Stone and Owen McIntyre,
Yeah.
who could give a crap about birds. And then we had Tom. His last name's failing me. He works at the Denver Zoo, and he's Rob's buddy from way back. And so he was the other. He made our fifth, and so we had a pretty good crew. It was a lot of fun. We had a good time.
Who took
a
the
lot of
best pictures?
Oh, Rob. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Rob takes a lot of pictures, and
Does he? Okay.
yeah, it was kind of funny because Owen found a banded rock rattlesnake, right? The
Nice.
clobber eye.
Yep.
So that was pretty sweet. We were all excited. It was kind of funny because we were, could hear it rattling. Well, he flipped some artificial cover, and it was under there. He's like, rattlesnake. And, he didn't have a hook. So we come running over, just to kind of make sure we could get pictures of it. Yeah, I shouldn't. Anyway, we it kind of disappears. So we're trying to uncover other stuff to get a glimpse of it and get some pictures of it and stuff. And so, and we could hear it rattling, and we're not seeing it, and finally I looked down, and it's right between my feet, like just coiled up there between my feet, rattling away. So we were able to get pictures of it. And that's the nice thing about rattlesnakes is they don't really try to flee. They're more kind of stand their ground and rattle and be defensive. So that helps when you're trying to get pictures of them. So we got some Rob got some great pictures. We got some okay pictures. But I've kind of resorted just to using my cell phone for photos. Like they do a great job.
Was that a pucker factor when you looked down and he was right there between your legs?
I think if it was this was a smaller animal. So if it was any bigger, it would have been a little intimidating.
Might have bit you in the junk.
Yeah. That was kind of getting ahead of things. That was kind of towards the latter end, but I thought that was a fitting story for that.
Yeah, it's a good story. Yeah.
So anyway, we started out, they flew into Tucson. So I picked them up at Tucson. We went and visited, Dustin Gran. He was on Morelia Python's radio and gave an interview, and really he's a great field herper. He does quite a bit of field herping. Younger guy. He's got a great collection too. So he showed us his collection. We got to see, his animals and stuff. He has some cool stuff and really nice setups for him. And so we visited with him for a bit because I'd picked up Keith. We did the podcast. I picked up Rob and Tom, and then we went to Dustin's house because Owen's flight was delayed. So we had to wait for Owen. And so we, after we hung out with Dustin for a bit, we went and grabbed Owen, and then we just drove to Cave Creek, Arizona, which is kind of on the Arizona-New Mexico border. So on the eastern, side of the state. So we kept crossing time zones, back and forth from Arizona and New Mexico time. Actually, in the first Airbnb, it's called Cave Creek Ranch. And it's a fantastic spot. It was really cool. I mean, if you like birds, or cool mammals, if you're a naturalist, it's a great spot. Yeah. So, I just went out in the morning and just sat, and they come out and put seed in the feeders and rub peanut butter on the trees and stuff like that. So all the animals are coming out. There's deer everywhere. We saw javelina, like just right on the grounds. And,
that's pretty awesome.
All sorts of birds. And it's a huge birder spot. Like there's a ton of birders that come there. So really a cool place. And I was just, over the moon, just out there every morning with my
Did you up your bird count?
I added another, 10 or so species. So that was
So what
cool.
are you at now? 247, 245?
245, or 244. So good. You're keeping track, man.
I give you crap, but I pay attention, dude. I do pay attention.
So we'd go out from Cave Creek. We did a few hikes up the canyons, which were really cool looking, just for whatever we could see and enjoying the landscape and stuff. Mm-hmm. So and there was kind of a cold front coming through. So things got a little chilly. The nights would cool down really fast, and it even got down into the 30s one night. And so obviously road cruising at night is not the best if temperatures are down around the low 50s or 40s, you're not going to see too much, but we did see quite a bit. One windy night, we saw several species of snake, desert king snake. That was probably a highlight for me. Was the first desert king snake in the wild I'd seen. And then we found a couple Mojave rattlers and a western diamondback. So
cool. So Owen got a lot of his rattlesnakes. He got to see, got to see,
Yep.
got to see his rattlesnakes. I know that's what I remember him saying, that was what he was really, really excited to go and find, were a bunch of rattlesnake species.
Well, and Arizona is a good place for that. You know, there's
absolutely.
A lot of different species. I was surprised we didn't see a blacktail rattlesnake. That's one of the more common species down there, and we didn't see any of those. I was kind of bummed out because but I can't complain because we saw the two kind of main targets that Rob had, put us in the right habitat for. So we found the banded rock rattlesnakes and the ridge nose rattlesnakes. And
that ridge nose was really nice.
Oh yeah, that was really cool.
Nice. Yeah,
and
that was a good score.
I was just walking along the stream bed, and when you're herping for rattlesnakes, a lot of times you hear them before you see them.
So, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing. I mean, they're very polite snakes. You know, they let you know they're right there, and you can take some nice pictures of them and let them go on their way.
Yeah,
everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a thrill to see those. We found two of each. So after that was. So
were they grouped together, or were they just random spots, or were they,
the clouds were in the same spot and the ridge noses were in two separate
different spots. Gotcha.
Yeah. But after that was all in the Huachucas. So we left Cave Creek on Wednesday. We got to go over to Bob Ashley's place.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's got a really cool place, neat museum, and all. I mean, it's dangerous for a herper to go there because he's got all the books and all the shirts and hats and all that kind of stuff. So it was really fun, and had a good time checking out his place. He showed us around. He'd just gotten back from Tinley, so he was like,
"Oh, I bet he was,
warp speed." He had a lot of stuff to do, but he was nice enough to take the time to show us around. So that was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, Bob's a great guy.
Yeah, I haven't seen Bob in a while. It's been a long time since I've seen Bob. Not since like old NARBC days. Yeah,
pulled the NARBC out of Southern California.
Yeah.
So
he's a nice guy.
Oh yeah, he's true pioneer and is doing a lot of good stuff for herpetoculture and herpetology and all sorts of stuff. So it was really fun to listen to him talk about, rattlesnakes. He knows quite a bit about rattlesnakes. So, and showing us around his amazing museum. The Geronimo museum was really amazing as well and really cool. So, a lot of fun. But unfortunately, he didn't have a ton of time, and the weather conditions were a little cool, so not many of the animals in the museum, in the outdoor pits were out and about. The indoor stuff was pretty cool. He had one of the vine snakes on display that you can find down in southern Arizona, so that was cool to see. At least,
is it a big? He got a pretty big collection there, or?
Well, so in the museum, there's it's a fairly good size room, and there's two separate rooms with a bunch of different native animals on display. So that was cool. And then he took us back and showed us some of the off exhibit stuff. Yeah. Some of the projects he's got going. They've whittled down the collection quite a bit recently, just because it's too much. And I think they're one of his keepers had to leave and took another job somewhere else. I mean, the hard thing is out there's not much going on. Like there's a diner, there's not even a gas station within, a half-hour drive or something. Yeah. So you gotta, no grocery stores, anything like that. So I think he employs probably half the people in that area.
Right.
That's hard to keep somebody permanently down there. But I have heard there's like a ton of, retired PhDs that live down there. So I'm surprised.
Is that where retired PhDs go?
that are into reptiles or birds or whatever.
Well, I mean,
great spot to live.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Well, and it's funny too. My mom and all of my aunts and uncles, they love the Anza Borrego Desert because, and I think it's just older people like those warm, dry, kind of desert climates. And so they're all, I'm like, Mom, why don't you try Palm Springs? There's shopping. Oh, no. Which is cool with me. I love the Anza Borrego Desert. So I like going down there, but I just think I just think it's funny. It's funny that you say that retired PhDs go to the Arizona desert, and it's like, yeah, that sounds about right.
It's kind of like a convergence of a couple different desert systems, so you get a lot of variety in a small area.
Yeah.
We were, looking for montane rattlesnake species one day, and then the next day we're looking for Gila monsters and tortoises and stuff like that. And just a half an hour up the road.
Yeah. Clearly more going on than with my mom and my aunts and uncles. Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
And after we left Bob's place, we drove up the road towards the more lower desert stuff and saw a freshly hit Mexican hognose on the road. It was such a bummer. I was so disappointed that was my first time seeing that species in the wild. That had to be that way, just barely clipped on the face. So I was pretty sad about that, and I think everybody got sick of me being sad about that.
Yeah.
It stuck with me for a while. I hate seeing DORs. It's not fun. So anyway, we had a nice time there, but like I said, there's a cold front coming through. So other than that one really good night of herping and a few DORs during the day, and then a couple Scaloporus that were pretty amazing looking animals, not much else going on there. It was a little slow other than the bird and mammal life. We saw the javelina, the a coati. That was cool. They're pretty interesting mammals. And there was one just like sitting in the tree. Owen looks over, he's like, there's a coati in the tree. And he had some negative interactions with them when he was during his zoo career, and so
did
he gave them a wide berth. And then they were like, every night you'd see skunks cruising around. They'd be hanging out on the property. So a lot of cool animals in the area. The bird varieties were really cool too. Didn't see any trogons. That's kind of one of the major draws down there is the elegant trogon, which is a kind of more of a tropical bird, but it makes its way up into that part of Arizona, New Mexico. So then we headed over to the Huachuca Mountains primarily, and we stayed at another Airbnb kind of north of the Huachucas and spent the rest of the week there. So
nice.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Found some horn lizards, Great Basin, or not a Great Basin, but a Sonoran gopher snake. The horn lizards were the greater shorthorn lizards, Hernandesi.
Cool.
And then the two species of rattlesnake, and it was
not bad. Not bad.
Yeah, especially for the weather conditions.
Yeah.
But it was pretty cool. So.
And it sounds like a fun time was had by all.
Oh yeah. We coined some new terms.
And you were driving, so you couldn't complain. You couldn't complain about the driving issues.
And I stopped pretty quickly, and I diverted traffic around me so they wouldn't hit the snake.
Did anybody else complain about your driving?
I don't think so. Oh, Keith was very nervous when we were driving up mountain passes and on dirt roads that had a steep drop off right on the edge.
Hadn't quite gotten comfortable with the Justin.
Well, I don't think it mattered who was driving. He was just uncomfortable on those roads because these are like windy, steep, bumpy, rocky dirt roads.
Certain death on the other side of the guardrail.
Exactly. So I can't say that I was completely innocent of driving a little closer to the edge just to mess with him a little bit. You gotta let him know he's alive,
Sure.
But that was, that was really cool because Keith just he had a battle with cancer and he beat it. So it was great that he's out there, keeping up with us and, or exceeding our pace in some instances. Like he was not slowing us down. That's for sure.
That's awesome.
So that was cool.
That's awesome.
Great to herp with him.
Yeah.
But I, it's hard to encompass a trip,
for sure.
Some pretty funny things. We coined the term Smitty tears to rate trails because he had such a rough time in West Texas on some of those trails. So we gave a Smitty tears rating.
Oh my God. Is it, what is it? Just like a 1 through 5 or does that get much, like a 5 Smitty tears?
You go from tears or buckets of tears if it's a really bad one, but Smitty groans if it's not so bad.
Oh, I got you.
I don't know.
Oh,
We had a
okay.
good
I got
laugh
you. Yeah,
on his
I
expense
got
there,
you.
but
All right.
yeah.
That's pretty funny.
I have yet to hear
That's
his
pretty
feedback
funny.
on that one, but we'll see what he has to say. But yeah, always good. I mean, I think Keith and Tom were maybe getting a little sick of, I know Keith said I need to binge The Simpsons so I can understand half the conversation, because Rob and Owen and
I
myself
got you.
are big into The Simpsons. So I think your Howdly Doodly was well received here.
Was well receivedly. All
Oh
right.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot of fun as usual.
I diddly
So
do my best, man.
yeah. So we it was a great trip.
Cool.
All right, enough
Yeah, no
BSing
more
about that.
reminiscing.
Yeah, let's get on to topic at hand. What do you say? You want to
Okie
fight?
dokie. Sure.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the ethics or the pros and cons of switching animals over from a natural diet that they would eat in the wild to, maybe unnatural, lab rodent diet, or prepared food diet, those kind of things. So we'll discuss both sides of that topic. So um, are you going to call it this time, or do you
I
want me to
don't
call
know,
my own?
dude. I
It
don't
doesn't
know.
matter.
No,
I
I
might as
don't
well
care.
just.
I mean, it doesn't. I just wanted to see what would happen if you
I'm just
had
saying
to
we could save a
call
lot of
your
time and
own
just give
turn.
it to me.
Yeah. See, exactly,
All right. Okay. Well,
exactly.
go ahead and call this one. I'll
All right.
flip.
It's tails.
It is heads, my friend.
I hate,
I
I hate
oh
your
man.
quarter.
I
I
I
hate your quarter.
I just am astounded. Like, it would be funny. I mean, it wouldn't be as funny if I was like cheating, but it's funny because it's legit every time. Like, you're like Ashley, she's always calling the wrong gender on all my snakes. Like, anytime she says like, "Oh, that he looks good," I'm like, "Ashley, it's a female." So you've got the Ashley luck, I guess. All right. Well, I'm going to take the pro side, I guess, of unnatural diets
Okay.
for captive reptiles.
All right.
So
Sure.
you can take the defend the using a more natural diet, I guess. But,
Sure.
okay.
All right.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and defer to my good friend Chuck
That's
to
fine.
have the opening statement
That's
here.
fine. All right.
All
So,
right.
I mean, obviously, any animal kind of evolves to eat a diet that is native to where they're at. I mean,
Mhm.
you certainly can find geckos that in different areas that will eat different diets, right? So and over time, those animals will they'll grow they will create a complex diet so that they get all of their nutritional needs, and they may not necessarily get it all from one place. And so I think that the difficulty in giving a captive bred animal or a captive born animal or a captive animal a non-natural diet is that you're kind of directing them to eat something that they're not used to eating. One, so it's going to be difficult. You're going to potentially have a hard time getting them to accept that food, and
Mhm.
you don't really know what the always what the makeup of their diet is, and how that would look as far as a nutrient profile for that animal. So we feeding, let's say, rodents,
Mhm.
we know what that nutrient profile looks like. And so I think as we feed those animals, we could be doing all kinds of, they'll still eat, they may eat it, but we may be creating a diet which grossly throws their normal nutritional intake out of whack. So I think that's probably the big, the overarching for me of like why you would want to try to replicate a more natural diet. If you knew, how complex or what that diet consisted of.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, animals evolved to fill different nippers or niches. So we,
Yeah.
I was watching a nature documentary once, and they had like talking about, animals that had adapted to feed on different food sources, and they were talking about flowers and different animals that had co-evolved with the flower to eat the nectar from that specific flower. And there was this weird flower somewhere out in the jungle of New Guinea or something, I can't remember where it was, but they had this it had a really super long tunnel, basically the flower part, to get to the nectar. And so they said, well, if this flower has evolved this way, there's probably something that has co-evolved to feed specifically from that flower. And so they set up cameras and they waited and waited and waited, trying to figure out what the animal was that was going to feed from the flower. Was it going to be a small insect that could crawl inside and get the nectar and then get the
help pollinate the
on
flower.
its way out or whatever.
Yep.
So all of a sudden this moth comes rolling up, and it's got this super long tongue that it unrolls, and sticks into the flower. And so this moth had developed mouth parts that were long enough to reach to the nectar and feed from the flower. So I definitely would agree that animals specifically evolved to take different food sources. Now, I guess the question is it the competition that drives that? So, say if other food sources were easier to, there was less competition for that nectar, and that was the only moth, it is the only game in town, just for argument's sake, would it continue to maintain that long giant tongue if there wasn't a reason, if there wasn't that competition? When we take something into captivity, we're taking away its competition. We're giving it an easy meal, so even though something might evolve to feed on a specific prey item, as long as we can kind of meet their nutritional demands and give them something that's not going to be unhealthy, I think there's no real reason not to feed it, something unnatural. I mean, we're putting it in an unnatural state. We're altering most likely the gut flora, and that may aid and help in digesting that specific prey item. When we breed them in captivity, we're selecting for them, who they're going to breed with, and that kind of thing. So we're kind of taking the nature out of the animal to some extent when we breed it in captivity and somewhat semi-domesticate it. So I would argue that, once we take it out of the wild, that kind of, and we select what it's eating, we've kind of gotten past that maybe requirement or need for a more natural diet.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's. I mean, we do that. Yeah, and we, we got animals that are alive and don't, necessarily eat the prey source that we're feeding them in the wild. But I mean, I think there's been, studies about, gut flora, at least in humans, that and some of the findings were almost so groundbreaking towards your gut flora having impacts on disease, and overall human health. So not to anthropomorphize and say that all fauna behaves that way, but we develop similar systems. Our digestive system comes from earlier animals, so there is reason to say that that may work in other animals the way it works in us. And so, well, yes, you're right. We can feed different prey sources and potentially meet those, those dietary requirements. But what does, ultimately, what does changing that microbial composition, what does that do? And I think, to the bigger point I'm making is we really don't know. We don't know a lot of times what a complete diet looks like for a lot of animals in the wild. So we don't even have a complete picture of what they naturally eat, much less how to support. If we could say, okay, this sphere is what comprises X animal's diet, and this sphere is what we feed them in their, in their native in their native habitat or in their captive habitats, and here's why they're comparable. And I think we do that at some level. I think you can look at geckos, and you can look at, the way we use powder diets and things like that to kind of, figure out what the nutrient profiles need to be and what the things they need, and they'll eat them. And we know how to supplement some of that stuff and do that in a way that's relatively close. But I don't think that you can point to one gecko species that we know a lot about and say all. I think, there's definitely areas where we're making best guesses. And I think that, I do think that potentially some of the problems that we have around why some animals don't do well in captivity could very well be dietarily based. I mean, maybe they'll eat what we feed them because they don't want to die. But maybe, the secondary outcome of that is deteriorate. Oh my God, I can't speak today. Is detrimental to them,
Well, I really got fascinated by the gut microflora stuff. We were doing a project with applying for a big program grant, which is a huge conglomerations of different scientists in different areas looking at, one factor on different aspects of that, and how the gut microflora contribute to that or whatever. Excuse me. And so, but I question, once we take it out of the wild, how are they getting access to that natural gut flora? I mean, we're not importing soil or food items or wild, snake or lizard poop to allow the juveniles. A lot of juveniles will eat the feces of their of adults of their species to get those gut microflora. But once you've brought something, and we've seen this in people, so I do agree that you can kind of make those parallels with other animal species. But once you alter the diet, you do alter that. And so if you're going to take something out of the wild, there's no real way around disrupting that balance or that gut microflora. And yes, it could contribute to negative effects. But a lot of changes are often neutral, right? As long as you've got beneficial flora, they may not necessarily care if it's the correct bacteria that they have in the wild or if it's just something similar that plays the same role in that gut, in their gut contents. So while it might be helpful to have the actual gut components and thing, I just don't think that's realistic to maintain.
So you don't think, you don't think like so just to go back, like you talked about basically the flora and fauna interplay between form and function of reproduction and food between plants and animals, which happens through a form of coevolution, right? But yet the gut microbe and then the food content would be are completely disconnected from each other. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't it almost doesn't play like it doesn't make sense that the habitat that they need to live, or that they co-evolve with, that they're highly coupled to, and the food sources that they get, which help dictate the microbial content of their gut, are decoupled from each other. Like I guess that's hard for me to put my head
Mhm.
around and say that there is, and look, I'm not saying there that you can't possibly be right with this, but to say like, all right, you can take something and put it wherever. It does not matter that it's situation or its food intake, as long as it meets some basic needs, and no matter how it changes that gut microbial content, there will be no, it should there why would there be anything bad that happens? And I just don't know if there's I mean I don't know that we could say that one way or another very
I don't think I'm
definitively.
saying that necessarily. I'm saying that if you take it out of the wild and you remove it from its natural environment, you remove it from those sources of flora and fauna in its natural environment, you are altering it just by removing it from there, because you're putting it in a different environment, and the bacterial, flora and fauna around their new environment, which is most likely severely diminished compared to a wild, because people are cleaning their cages, and, they don't have dirt in the cages. They might have
Sure.
shavings or newspaper or something that don't have those beneficial, bacteria. And plus it's, different environment anyway. So if you got dirt from outside, it's not the same dirt. If your animal's from Australia, it's not the same dirt as in Australia, and it's not the same microbiome that's in Australia. So once you take it out of the wild, you're altering that anyway. And
Well,
so,
that's
and
fair.
also the yeah, and the food also drives the microflora, and we've shown that, if
Yes.
animals switch diet, they'll switch gut microflora, and that can have, it's
And
not
I think that
like
was
a
more, I
good
think
or
that's
bad,
the direction I was driving at. Yeah.
yeah, and so,
Well, I mean,
if
is
you're
it? I mean,
I mean,
I
I
mean,
don't. I mean, you have a lot of different profiles in humans, right? And here's an
sure.
example, right? So just using humans as an example, if you have a high fatty Western diet, you might get some gut microflora that contribute to different health issues,
Hmm.
and and that's been demonstrated in people. But then if you have like a high fiber plant diet, you can also get different bacteria colonizing your gut that contribute to inflammation. So you might think, oh, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating an all plant diet or something, I don't eat meat, or I don't eat this or that. But maybe those bacteria that you're promoting are actually going to contribute to an inflammatory state within your gut.
Or it's the percentage of one type that you're eating. I think the problem that, and at the root of that, what you're talking about is a a high protein meat diet. An all protein meat diet leads to inflammation, just like a high plant low. So it's that lack of variety, which kind of takes me back to the whole idea of having a more complex, dietary makeup. And so when we do take animals out, and it's not to say that some people don't uh, do a more complex diet for their captive
Mhm.
animals. Certainly that's the case, but I would say by and large, people are not replicating the variety that some of these animals feed on
Sure.
in the wild, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I would draw the concern and say, maybe things are lacking that way.
Yeah. Is the variety a necessity though? I guess that's the thing, is unless you're eating all baby rodents, which are high in fat, so you're going to increase the fat content. I can see that having a negative effect on an animal. But, if you're feeding like 10 different rodent species, is it really better than feeding a single rodent species. I don't know if it's going to make that much of a difference
Well,
functionally.
or if you're eating birds, or I mean, I think, or if you're even possibly taking other reptiles, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe some amphibians. I think in those cases, the difference between other reptiles and fowl and amphibians, that could be a fairly significant or relevant difference.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're trying to force something that's used to eating, vegetables, a
Right.
vegetarian
Well,
reptile, and you're trying to feed them mice, then yeah, maybe. But at the same token, like I think we have it in our minds that, you know, tortoises are always vegetarian. I was listening to Ryan DeMoss on a different podcast, and he was on our show a while back.
mhm.
Really cool guy, but
Yep.
he was talking about their tortoises, like the Galapagos tortoises, will be raised up, and if something goes under them for shade, like a bird or something, they'll drop down and crush it,
Squish
and
them.
then
Yeah.
they'll eat the bird. And you don't
Yeah.
think of tortoises as eating or needing to eat a bird, but in the wild they probably do that all the time.
Sure.
And a lot of tortoises have been found to be almost omnivorous, where they're
Right.
eating a lot
And
of carrion or animals, worms and stuff like that. So
and that goes to my point about having a varied diet, where eating too much of one thing. You think of tortoises as a highly vegetarian. They're vegan.
yeah.
And that's just not the
Hmm.
case.
Yeah.
That's not what a well balanced diet for them looks like. Just like in humans who all eat meat, or all eat a plant based diet, because I think um,
I guess the
having a
point of
well-rounded diet is and I guess my question around that do unnatural diets from what an animal might have as a natural wild diet, does that lead to an incomplete or not enough of a varied diet in some cases? And I think the answer in some cases is yes. In other cases, the answer is absolutely not. But in those cases that it does, I think there can be some significant issue. Probably not in the short term, but maybe over the longevity of the long term, right?
yeah,
Sorry, I know that was
I
long
guess
and windy,
no.
and
Uh, if you just give me a chance to respond here, buddy.
I know. See, that's what I was doing. I saw you. You're
Yeah.
rolling your eyes. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy, this
Come
guy.
on. Cut it off, buddy.
Can I get a word in here edgewise, huh?
Yeah. We need a moderator. No.
Yeah. Save us from ourselves.
I guess my point isn't necessarily that, a varied versus varied versus a monotypic diet, but more so a wild or natural diet versus a diet that we can provide in captivity, because they might be
Okay.
eating a Norwegian rat in the wild because they're everywhere, right? They
Right.
might eat one of those, and if we're feeding Norwegian rats in captivity, then we're approximating some of the natural species they might eat. But more I guess to the argument, if you give a varied diet of tilapia that's easily accessible to the normal person, or chicken that's or quail that are easily accessible, or earthworms or whatever, you're varying the diet, but it's with stuff that's commercially available, that's
Sure.
commercially raised. I think for the most part you're not going to see much of a difference between those dietary items and a natural dietary item necessarily. I mean, it's like energy in, energy out kind of.
Yeah, I think if you're talking prey source, apples and apples, oranges and
Yeah.
oranges, yes, you're probably right. You're
Mhm.
probably right. I mean,
And then if you're trying to replicate a wild diet, you're gonna spend a lot of
oh,
energy, money.
well, and I think it's unreasonable, and I
Yeah.
think that's why it's almost it when you get into kind of what you're talking about, it's almost a moot point, because we can't
Mhm.
go in and replicate the wild diets of most of this stuff that we
Yeah.
have, because we just do not have access
Yeah.
to those animals at that level, right?
That's right.
So,
And I think the best example of that is probably the hognose snake, Western
mhm,
hognose snakes. You've got animals that come out of the egg and they accept a pinky mouse right out of the gate. You don't even have to scent it anymore. So
Mhm.
obviously they're changing or adapting to some extent from the wild counterparts that come out heavily genetically programmed to seek toads. That's their food item. And it's not to say that in the wild they don't find a mouse or something and go after it or try to eat it or try to eat something else. But in captivity, we're not trying to source toads to feed our Western hognoses. At best, we might get toad scent and rub it on a mouse. Now, those have been captive bred and, multiple generations. And like I said, they're somewhat domesticated now. So I'm not seeing, a downside of trying to replicate a natural, prey item for those.
Okay.
So that would be a major, I guess, argument in favor of,
Yeah. Well, I
once you
mean,
bring them out of the wild. Yeah.
and it's like I said, it's kind of stupid because we're not going to really try to do it anyway, right? So it's like I can argue. Look. Is it always going to be better to replicate a natural diet for something that's is it going to be easier to get it feeding? Is it going to get its nutritional makeup that it needs because of the very diet? Yes, yes, yes. Is it reasonable and will it happen? No. So I can still be right, but irrelevant in the argument, right?
Yeah, that's a very, very true point. That like, there's certain snakes that specialize on blind snakes. Are you going to get a
Yeah.
colony and breed blind snakes just so you can keep that species? Probably not. But
Like
maybe
you would
somebody
literally
somewhere
have
might try
you would
that.
have a whole other business.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would literally have a whole other business around selling, these whatever to feed your
Yeah.
whatever, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
you could, you would literally have to be the person who, I breed these and then I
Mhm.
sell these so that you can feed your whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of kind of an interesting strategy, but
Mhm.
a little unreasonable too at the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think part of the industry, the herpetocultural industry is based around that principle where, you've got Alan Rapace who goes out and invents all these different diets and tries to approximate, what they might receive in nature in his diets. And, through that effort, he made it so they're easily kept, easily produced, and now, like we saw at NAR or not NARBC at the Super Show in
Super
Anaheim.
Show.
Yeah, there were
Oh, you still
so
call it
many. I know,
NARBC.
I know. It's hard to get over that.
I
But
know. I
mean,
got you.
how
I'm
many
with you.
tables had crested geckos or
Yeah.
all the different New Caledonian geckos? Like it's almost becoming like the next ball python in lizard form.
Sure.
And so I think that adaptation of trying to replicate somewhat natural diet, but make it a commercially available, easily produced diet, and maybe not using the same things they would eat in nature, but similar things that provide similar nutrition has worked out very well in a lot of ways for
Mm-hmm.
both Alan and his diets, as
Sure.
well as people who are wanting to keep those species because they are really cool species. So
Yep.
it's nice that we have that support and we have a non-natural diet that can support these animals.
I think, if you look at it as hopefully, I think people, at least I think dietarily in a layered kind of approach. And especially with geckos, that powdered diet is a nice base to work from. And obviously, like we talked to the one, oh man, I don't remember who it was. It was on the Super Show
Mm-hmm.
live when we did, where somebody was saying basically, like they're great, like geckos. I think it was just geckos. They were great because you can feed them an insect diet, or if you don't like insects, you can feed them
Yeah.
a powder diet, and
Mm-hmm.
they're two. They have two food bases, which I tend to think a little differently. I tend to think that that powder diet is kind of a base diet, and then you can add on top of that to get variety and work, work it around. But certainly, I mean, what an amazing tool. And and I think some of that comes out of the science and technology that we employ around, being scientific humans and studying animals and figuring out some of these dietary requirements and figuring out, like, all right, can we do this? Yeah, absolutely we can. And that's a powerful piece of technology. And to your point, it works. But I think you do have to be careful, because you need to pay attention. And one of the things that that Frank Payne will always say is that he attributes a lot of his reproductive success long term. It is how he feeds his feeders and how he supports his animals and the diets that he uses, as to why he has prolonged long-term reproductive success with his animals. And I think that's absolutely 100% right. It is, you're not gonna, and you're not gonna just feed a powder diet to geckos and expect them to breed like forever and ever and ever and never need that. You need to probably do more than that. And I'm not trying to speak unequivocally, because I'm sure there's somebody out there who's like, I've done it and that's fine. And
sure.
But I mean, to his point, right?
Yeah. And he's not using necessarily he's using commercially available insects, but he's maybe gut loading them. He's concerned with nutrition and things.
Absolutely.
And I mean, to your point, we need to understand their natural history, because I imagine some of these geckos are heavy insect feeders at some points of the year, and other points of the year they're licking sap or flowers or whatever. So we need to be aware of the animal's natural history, what they 100%. Typically eat in the wild. And if you don't know that, it makes it very difficult to, I think, be successful with a lot of these species. So to your point, we need to understand what they eat in the wild.
Yeah. And it's a heavily multifaceted thing, because it's like you said, it's not just what they're eating, it's what they're eating is eating and eating. It's a food web. So, how that food web is fed has a lot to do with, it's easy for us to boil stuff down. And when you get high enough on a food web, a lot of the not great stuff that are in animals that you eat, as apex predators, we eat bioaccumulators. And so, we're as humans, like, we are, stand the worst chance of eating just bad stuff, because we eat so high on the food chain, right? So there's all kinds of that play at work when you're kind of talking about this stuff. So I do agree with you, that you can, you definitely can make that pivot and keep healthy animals, but it is highly complex. And like you said, the way it may work from season to season with what these what animals are feeding on, their diet might change, and so might the target species that you're talking about. So it's a lot to kind of take into account.
Well, and also, in nature, things are rough. Like you mentioned, bioaccumulators, we almost lost condors because they were eating things that were bad, and they were accumulating those toxins or whatnot. Same with eagles and, any meat eaters at the top of the food chain.
Raptors specifically were really, and so, by that.
We definitely wouldn't want to replicate something like that, that happens in nature as a result of human interference and human manipulation.
And I do think, to your point, in a captive setting, when we're controlling what we're feeding to our feeders, that helps control some of that natural bioaccumulation that can happen. But obviously, like, you have to understand what's going into those food sources and what they're comprised of, like like the friend you had that was feeding his skinks
the
dog
food,
the bad dog food. I mean, how would he know? And it's not, if you feed it to dogs, it's not at a level that it's lethal to a dog. Horrible that you're feeding that, but like, you would never find out that you're feeding your dog other dogs unless you killed your skinks with it. Like, so it's a dirty game, folks. It's a dirty game. You got to be careful out there. It's rough in the streets.
Yeah. And, I think we do our best to avoid that. And I guess the other side of it, in nature, they're getting parasites, they're getting, ticks, getting different things like that. And that's all can be a negative impact on the animals, or it could be a neutral impact. There's most wild reptiles probably have some sort of parasite or something that's living in harmony with their natural balance. And it's not till they're stressed or something that, negative effects occur from that. So, it's hard to say what's critical and what's not critical, how things interact. I don't think we know enough to really, comment on all those kind of things, the bioflora.
I think we
biome.
know enough to make it look like we know what we're doing, but we don't understand at a complete level, at a whole picture level. We're nowhere close. We know nothing.
It's hard too, because like a lot of, like myself, I go up to Iron Range to try to find a green tree python because I'm interested in those and I want to see, what they're doing in the wild, that kind of thing. See them in the wild. But I'm only going when it's accessible to drive there. During the end of the dry season, or during the wet season, you almost have to take a boat or a plane to get there, and so it's very you're not seeing the whole picture. You're seeing a snapshot, and so unless you're in their environment, or if there's a scientist that's doing a study on them and looking at their dietary components over time, you're not going to have a complete understanding of their dietary preferences, and that stuff might be out there. Somebody might have published a paper back in 1982 and you just didn't know it existed. So, that makes it tricky too, is accessing the scientific literature and finding those works. I'm still finding, papers that I missed previously. I just found one today on, pythons in Western Australia, and it talked, it was kind of old. I think it was listing just different names for things.
Older,
a little outdated in some ways, but in other ways, it's very, very helpful. But I've intensively searched for papers on Morelia pythons, and so it's interesting to find one that I missed that was published a while back. So it's hard to get all the information that's necessary to know what we don't know, or but it's also good to ask questions.
And in that deep well of information that we have, we still haven't really scratched the surface of finding how deep the well is,
for sure.
I mean,
what happens if you include a bird occasionally in the Galapagos tortoise diet? Are they is that going to help them, or and then you get to the point, are you feeding too many birds and you're impacting them negatively? Because they did find a lot of the early diets where they were feeding them green leafy vegetables was not healthy for Galapagos tortoises, and they had shell deformities, and they did they did not fare well. But it was hard because they mature very slowly, they grow very slowly, and so it wasn't until it was very apparent the negative effects and then
set in
how to reverse that or work that out. That might not be possible to reverse it, and so they have to build some wheels or something for the tortoise to wheel around on. So it's kind of, we do make a lot of mistakes in what we're doing. And I think that's kind of how, sometimes you have to make mistakes to know what you don't know,
Well,
we don't need to do that next time. Let's fix that.
I'm a good gardener because I killed a lot of plants to get there. You know
Yeah,
what I
right.
mean? That's, I mean, and gosh, man, you never want to say that. And,
yeah. But it's true. I mean, I don't know any reptile keeper who's never had an animal die on them because of,
or has never made
a mistake they've made.
That, absolutely.
Exactly. So,
and hopefully those mistakes are your best teaching tools because something had to, suffer, because of it. And it's, that it's not a great thing to talk about, but it's a reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we tell ourselves, well, hopefully if I've learned something from it, it wasn't in vain. Or, a lot of times we try to make ourselves feel better by saying, well, in the wild, they probably would have been eaten by something a long time ago and died a miserable, horrible, violent death at the hands of a butcher bird or something,
Right.
So,
well, and isn't that true?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
I mean, and not, not to say that there
You
is
just
a
let
place,
it happen willy nilly.
not to say that there isn't a place for not making that excuse,
Yeah.
but that is a reality that, nature is far, far less forgiving than we are in captivity. So,
and bringing it back to topic is, when we're able to keep these animals in a captive environment, we can provide them, different food sources. And maybe we don't have the exact thing they co-evolved to eat, but we have something similar that can fill the same role and give them the nutrients and the protein and whatever they need to grow and develop properly. But that's not to say once you find something that works, you've got it all figured out. And it's good to be intellectually curious, keep digging, keep looking, keep figuring things out, because there's important things to be found. So I don't know. I think I don't know if I have any other hard hitting topics or points to this argument, but I do think, I would summarize with, we need to do what we need to do in captivity.
I did the best I could with a point.
You got the shirt and the stick. You gotta win a coin flip once.
Listen, man, I don't know.
But as long as you stay intellectually curious and you're trying to improve the way you're keeping your animals or finding better methods, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah.
So I remember, who was it? Maybe Harlan Wall was.
No, I thought you were going to say Burt Langworth, but
no.
I always feel like that's a safe bet for me to throw out there. It's like, no, it was Burt Langworth. That's awesome.
Harlan was talking about giving probiotics, and he was like using these commercially available probiotics but he was talking about how, the soil that we give them in their environment doesn't have the proper bacteria. But then I'm like, well, you're giving them probiotics that aren't the bacteria that they're experiencing or getting in the wild, so if probiotics are a good thing, then, and they replace that need for the natural flora that they're getting in their natural soil, then what are you worried about their cage environment as much for? So I just thought that was kind of incongruous, but it was kind of funny. Anyway, we have a very limited understanding about a lot of these things, and it would be good to build that experience, or to, I don't know what the answer is, because it's really hard to get funding to study reptiles in the wild.
For sure.
Yeah. So
well, I mean, it's
but more power to those people seeking that,
and it's often why we end up talking about the way things are in relation to humans, because that's where the money goes to is studying human disease or human advantage in some technology. So and sometimes that's all you can do is proxy something that you've read that they proved in humans to say, like, well, like I said, animals evolve, their evolutionary history, we're towards the end of that. Right. So, the things that the organs, the functions, the forms that they evolved are in us as well. So yeah, I mean, that's about as close as we can get sometimes.
And, I think for a lot of human disease, like that's my job, is to model human disease in different systems. And a lot of time, a mouse is not a human.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you get something that works in a mouse that does not work in a human, and vice versa. So you've got to keep that in mind, that, just because it happens here doesn't necessarily mean it happens there, but sometimes it can, and it can model it appropriately. So tricky, complex things, but definitely worth a thought. So hopefully we've gotten some good topics to mill around in your brain, and hopefully we can all work together to increase our knowledge and figure out more about these cool reptiles that we all like. So yep. Any other things you want to bring up, or have we had a decent fight?
This has been a decent fight.
Maybe. I don't know. Here.
Let other people judge.
Yeah. All right. Well, as always, if you have any topics, or we've gotten some great feedback, and we have some fun guests lined up here soon that have thrown down the gauntlet and challenged us to a fight. We're happy to have anybody on to come and fight with us.
Yeah, so where is
don't hesitate to.
He hasn't responded yet, huh?
Not yet. Well, all right. One of our guests will be.
He was talking smack. He was talking some smack, man, and I thought it was going to go down, and it's going to be a good one.
It'll go down. It'll go down eventually.
All right.
So, thanks for listening, and again, we'll encourage you to listen to all the NPR podcasts that are out there. There's a nice array of cool information out there. So educate yourself, keep listening, and thanks for supporting us and listening to Reptile Fight Club. We'll catch you next week.
Fight on, folks.
Fight Club.